Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast, the show that takes you deeper into the stories that captivate us all.
Hmm.
And today we're
Right.
heading down
Now
under
sorry.
to explore a mystery that has haunted Australia for nearly 6 decades, the baffling disappearance of the Beaumont children.
Yeah, it's a case that gripped the nation not just for the tragic circumstances, but also for how it reshaped Australian society, forever changing the way parents viewed childhood and safety.
So let's set the scene.
Yeah.
It's a scorching hot Australia day,
Okay.
January 26, 1966. Imagine a picture-perfect summer day at Glenelg Beach, just outside Adelaide.
Beautiful.
3 young siblings, Jane, the responsible eldest at 9.
Okay.
Playful 7-year-old Arnna and little 4-year-old Grant are enjoying a typical day at the beach.
Yeah, and that's the key here, the normalcy of it all.
Right.
Back then, kids roamed freely and the beach was their kingdom. Letting them go unsupervised wasn't just common, it was expected. No one could have predicted the nightmare that was about to unfold.
The Beaumonts live nearby, so the kids often took the short bus ride to Glenelg.
Okay.
That morning, they left home around 8:45, promising to be back on the noon bus.
All right.
But as midday came and went, their mother Nancy started to worry. When their father Jim, a taxi driver, arrived home earlier than expected from a work trip, the family's anxiety turned to sheer panic.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they were expected home at noon,
Yes.
and then as the day wore on, and they didn't show up.
Dad gets home too.
Yeah.
And now it's like, where are the kids?
Yeah, panic setting in.
Totally.
Yeah.
The initial search was frantic. Friends were questioned. Familiar routes retraced.
Right.
But there was no sign of the children. As hours slipped away, that gut-wrenching feeling that something was terribly wrong grew stronger.
Right.
Around 5:30 p.m., with their hope fading, Jim and Nancy went to the Glenelg police station and reported the unthinkable. Their 3 children were missing.
Wow. And so how quickly did a full-scale investigation get underway?
The police response was massive. At first, they assumed the children were simply lost,
Okay.
perhaps exploring the sandhills or the nearby Cully Reserve.
Makes sense.
But as the hours turned into days,
Yeah.
and despite extensive searches,
Right.
including the dramatic draining of the Paddalonga boat haven based on a witness statement,
Oh.
the fear that something far more sinister had occurred began to take hold.
Oh, yeah. So at first it was like, oh, the kids are just lost. They'll
Yeah.
turn up. But then as time goes on and they drain the boat haven, they're like, okay, something's really wrong here.
Yeah, it's not looking good.
No.
And then the focus of the investigation shifted. Witnesses started coming forward, recalling seeing the children that day, not alone, but with a tall, blondish man seemingly in his mid-30s.
Okay.
He was playing with them in the water. And what struck many observers as odd was how comfortable the children seemed with him, especially Jane, who was known to be quite shy.
Interesting. So they weren't acting like they were in any distress or danger?
No, not at all. This mysterious man became central to the investigation. Who was he? And why were the Beaumont children, particularly Jane, so at ease with a stranger?
Right.
Adding to the intrigue, Arnna had previously mentioned to her mother that Jane had a boyfriend at the beach.
Oh, so there might have been a previous encounter.
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay.
Sparking speculation that the children might have encountered this man before.
That adds a whole other layer to this, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Makes you wonder if maybe this wasn't just a random encounter on that day.
Exactly. But the mystery deepens. Remember, the children only had a few shillings for bus fare and snacks. Yet a shopkeeper at Wenzel's Bakery distinctly remembered Jane purchasing pasties and a meat pie.
Pasties and a meat pie.
With a £1 note.
Wow.
This was unusual on 2 fronts. Jane wasn't known to buy meat pies,
Right.
and she simply didn't have that kind of money.
Yeah, so where does she get a pound?
The theory emerged that the man had provided her with the money, further entwining him with the children's disappearance.
Oh, so he's buying them treats, essentially. Okay, this is getting creepier and creepier.
It is. This case is already full of twists and turns, and we're just getting started.
Oh, boy, I can't wait to hear more.
You won't want to miss what comes next, so hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss any more episodes of Tell Me More.
I'm definitely hitting that button.
Good. What's particularly perplexing is a later sighting of the children walking alone, seemingly carefree, and laughing about an hour after they were supposed to be home.
So they were seen after they were supposed to be home?
Yes.
Wow.
It was as if they were heading home completely oblivious to the worry they must have caused.
That's so strange.
This conflicting information has baffled investigators and fueled speculation for years.
You know, it's one thing if they were seen with the man, But to be seen alone after they were supposed to be home?
Mm-hmm.
That's just bizarre.
It really is. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive into the disappearance of the Beaumont children. We'll explore the strange twists and turns the investigation took, the false hope that arose, and the parade of suspects that emerged over the years.
Well, I'm hooked. I can't wait.
I knew you'd say that.
These kind of mysteries, they just pull you in, don't they?
They really do. There's something about the unknown, the unanswered questions, that keeps us coming back for more.
Absolutely. It's like a puzzle you can't put down.
Exactly.
Well, I'm eager to see what other pieces of this puzzle we uncover in part 2.
Me too. Stay tuned.
As weeks turned into months and months into years, the investigation continued, marked by periods of intense activity fueled by new leads, each more baffling than the last.
It's like chasing shadows, isn't it? Each promising lead ends up in a dead end, adding another layer of frustration and despair.
Precisely. Take, for instance, the woman who came forward months after the disappearance, claiming she saw a man with 3 children matching the Beaumont's description enter an empty house near hers. She even reported seeing the man chasing the youngest child down a lane, but by the next day, the house was deserted.
Another glimmer of hope extinguished. It's heartbreaking to imagine the Beaumont parents clinging to every shred of information, only to be met with disappointment time and again.
The emotional toll on the family must have been unimaginable. And it wasn't just the family. The entire nation was invested in this case, desperate for answers.
Speaking of national interest, there was that fascinating, albeit controversial chapter of the investigation involving Gerard Croiset, the Dutch psychic.
Yes, Croiset's arrival in Australia was a media frenzy. He captivated the public with his dramatic pronouncements, even leading police to a warehouse near the Beaumont home, convinced it was the children's burial site.
They actually raised money to demolish part of the warehouse for excavation, didn't they?
They did. But just like so many other leads, the excavation yielded nothing, only deepening the mystery and the sense of collective disappointment.
Then there were those letters, the ones that gave the Beaumonts a flicker of hope, only to have it cruelly snatched away.
Those letters, supposedly written by Jane and the man, were a bombshell. They painted a picture of a relatively normal life, even suggesting the children might be returned.
A meeting was arranged based on instructions in the letters, but it turned out to be a cruel hoax.
Decades later, forensic analysis revealed the letters were written by a teenager, adding insult to injury for a family that had already suffered so much.
It's difficult to fathom the cruelty of such an act. But through it all, the police never gave up relentlessly pursuing every possible lead. And over the years, several individuals emerged as potential suspects, each with their own chilling connections to the case.
One of the early suspects was Bevan Spencer von Einem, already a convicted murderer who bore a resemblance to the descriptions of the man seen with the children. There were claims that von Einem had admitted to taking the children for experiments, but those details were inconsistent with his known modus operandi.
His crimes were horrific, but it seems the evidence linking him to the Beaumont case was tenuous at best.
Then there's Arthur Stanley Brown, another convicted child killer who looked remarkably like the suspect's sketches. However, despite the resemblance, investigators were never able to definitively place him in Adelaide at the time of the disappearance.
So another possible lead, but with significant gaps in the timeline.
And the list goes on. James Ryan O'Neill, imprisoned for a child's murder in Tasmania, initially claimed responsibility for the Beaumont case, only to recant his confession later. His inconsistent statements and the lack of corroborating evidence cast serious doubt on his involvement.
It seems like every time a new suspect emerged, there was a mixture of hope and skepticism. Were they finally closing in on the truth, or was this just another false lead?
The uncertainty surrounding each suspect only added to the complexity and frustration of the investigation. And then you have Derek Percy, a convicted child killer, believed to be connected to several other unsolved cases. While he hinted at a possible connection to the Beaumonts, he claimed to have no memory of the events.
A chilling thought, but without any concrete evidence, it's just another piece of the puzzle that doesn't quite fit.
More recently, Alan Anthony Monroe, a convicted child sex offender, was investigated for possible involvement. But despite the similarities in his crimes and the fact that he was active in the area at the time, no direct link to the Beaumonts was established.
So many potential suspects, yet none with a clear and undeniable connection to the case. It's enough to make your head spin.
But of all the names that have surfaced over the years, one seems to keep resurfacing, sparking intense scrutiny and debate. Harry Phipps, the Satin Man.
Ah, yes, the Satin Man. His story is a chilling one, full of unsettling details and unanswered questions. Let's delve into that a bit further, shall we?
Phipps was a wealthy factory owner who lived just a few blocks from Glenelg Beach, and he bore a striking resemblance to the man seen with the children. What makes his case particularly intriguing is that his own son, Hayden, claimed to have seen the Beaumont children in his father's yard on that fateful day.
His own son. That's a shocking revelation. What else do we know about Phipps and his potential connection to the children's disappearance?
There are accounts from witnesses who recall seeing Phipps paying two young boys to dig a large hole in his factory yard on the weekend the children vanished. The timing and the unusual nature of the activity raised suspicion, but despite two separate excavations at the factory, no concrete evidence linking Phipps to the Beaumonts has been found.
So despite the circumstantial evidence and his son's claims, the investigation into Phipps hit a dead end. Does that mean he's been completely ruled out as a suspect? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to definitively rule anyone out in a case like this, especially with so many unanswered questions.
Right, and Phipps's case is a perfect example. He had the means, the opportunity, and there were those disturbing accounts from his son and other witnesses. But without any physical evidence linking him to the crime, the investigation stalled.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces. You can see the outline, the potential picture, but you can't quite complete it.
Exactly. And that's the frustrating thing about this case. There are all these tantalizing clues, these strange coincidences, but no smoking gun, no definitive proof that ties everything together.
And it's not just the mystery itself that makes this case so compelling, is it? The Beaumont children's disappearance had a profound impact on Australian society, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It really marked a turning point. It shattered the sense of safety and innocence that existed in Australia at the time. Before that fateful day in 1966, kids roamed freely. It was a different world.
It's hard to imagine now a time when kids could just wander off to the beach or the park unsupervised.
I know, it seems almost unthinkable today. But back then, it was the norm. Parents didn't think twice about letting their kids explore their neighborhoods on their own.
And then the Beaumont case happened, and everything changed.
It was a wake-up call, a stark reminder that even in the most familiar, seemingly safe environments, danger could lurk.
It's like a darkness descended, a sense of fear and vulnerability that permeated society.
And that fear changed the landscape of parenting in Australia forever. Playgrounds, emptied streets felt less safe, and a new era of caution and vigilance emerged.
A whole generation's sense of freedom and innocence lost in the shadow of this unsolved mystery. It's a heartbreaking legacy.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the enduring power of this case to evoke such strong emotions and provoke deep reflection.
So it's more than just a cold case. It's a cultural touchstone, a story that continues to resonate with Australians even after all these years.
I think it's the unanswered questions that keep us captivated, the not knowing, the constant wondering what happened to those children. It fuels our imagination and our desire to make sense of the senseless.
It's the human need for closure, isn't it? The desire to tie up loose ends to find a resolution, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy.
Absolutely. We want to believe that justice will prevail, that the truth will come out. And even though decades have passed, that hope still flickers.
And that's why the Beaumont case continues to fascinate us. It's a story that challenges our perceptions about safety, about childhood, about the very nature of evil.
It reminds us that the world can be a dark and unpredictable place, and that even in the midst of ordinary life, extraordinary things can happen, both good and bad.
Well said. And it reminds us that some stories, even those shrouded in mystery and sorrow, have the power to shape us, to challenge us, and to stay with us long after the final chapter has been written.
I couldn't agree more. The Beaumont children's disappearance is one such story. It's a story that will continue to haunt and intrigue us for generations to come.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of Australia's most enduring mysteries. If you enjoyed this episode and want to explore more captivating stories and thought-provoking discussions, be sure to subscribe to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep telling each other more.